Good evening, everyone. We're gonna get going. So it is on. So thank you everyone for coming out in person and on Zoom to participate in the second public information session with MKW and Associates to walk through the proposals they prepared for the Gateway project in Taylor Park. This is the second session they're conducting. The first one was held at the end of March, and the intent is to gather feedback from everyone in person and on Zoom on the proposals that they prepared so that they can take the feedback, adjust them, and eventually present them to the Taylor Park Gateway Subcommittee and the governing body. And so with that, I'll hand it off.
Okay, thank you very much, Jesse. And good evening, everyone. We are back. Some of you may have thought from last time around we may not be back, but we are back and we are happy to be back. And I'm addressing everyone in person and online. I'm glad people have been able to join us this evening to take a look at what we've been looking at over the past 8 weeks or so. We had a really good session last time around. We got a lot of comments from whoever showed up and whoever was online as well. We listened to you, I think, and I think we've developed some really interesting ideas for this gateway at Taylor Park, and we would like to share them with you this evening. What I would like to ask is that people were to hold their questions until we are done with the entire presentation. There's not many slides that we have to go through this evening. There's only about a dozen or so. And as we go through some of them, some of your questions may already be answered preemptively, even before you ask them. But we will have a really generous question and answer period after I go through and Jim goes through the various slides that we have here to show you this evening. I should mention again, my name is Alan Juba. I'm principal in charge at MKW Associates. With me tonight is Jim Welsh, senior landscape architect from MKW Associates also. And there's someone you did not meet last time around, Brian Goodstein, who was on vacation the last time around, because we do let people go on vacation every once in a while. And we're a smaller group this evening than we were last time around, because we have a much more focused effort that we're going to be looking at this evening. So with no further ado, Jesse, if you can go to the first slide.
1 second, somebody texted me that the audio sounds very low.
Are you able to adjust that, Jesse? Are you able to hear me in the back with the microphone around?
It's like that.
Okay. How is that? Any better? Okay.
The Zoom people are saying audio at meetings too low. They need to speak louder.
Okay, let me speak. I can hear it now.
Okay.
I can hear the reverberation, so hopefully that works a lot better. Okay, so Jesse, if we can go to the first slide then. It's the cover. Just to recap, what we saw a couple months ago will be the first few images that we have to share with you. And this is our existing conditions diagram. Milburn Avenue is that roadway along the right side of this drawing. And I think it's very clear to see the 4 parterres of the rose garden, which are rendered in that pinkish kind of color. Of course, you come down into that area from the sidewalk of Milburn Avenue. You sort of circumvent the existing elm tree that is there. You go down in elevation a bit. There is the gazebo in the center of the rose garden. That's indicated by that orange octagon on this particular plan. And then you're able to walk around the rose garden and through it into the larger portion of Taylor Park. There are some existing yew hedges that you see in kind of those crinkle sort of shapes in green that you see right along in there. But I'm sure a lot of people are very familiar with the space itself. We've been there a number of times. We've looked at the photos that we've taken as we've been developing our designs as well. This is an aerial image of the existing conditions, just to give you a better idea of what is actually there as far as trees, buildings, things of that nature. Again, you can see the 4 quadrants of the rose garden, one most particularly because it's out in the sun, the octagon in the center. Thank you for handling the cursor, Jesse. And then the trees that are around it. So there's quite a bit of vegetation. There's quite a bit of grade change from the sidewalk as well, as we were talking about last time. And you'll see in our various options that we've developed some of the ideas that we are developing to negotiate that grade change from the sidewalk down to the rose garden. And with that, we're going to take a look at the first of our designs. I'm going to hand this off to Jim.
Thank you, Al. Obviously, the first thing we wanted to mention is we've reoriented the site as you're looking at it. Before, it was kind of tilted on its side. Now we've put Milburn Avenue at the top of the site. The rest of Taylor Park is now at the bottom of the drawing. So we've kind of spun it a little. So now north is up, and you just wanted to give you a look at this. We're coming to tonight with 4 different options for the area. How's my volume?
Very good.
Okay. So we're coming with 4 different options. We're going to set it up this way. First option is going to be, we're going to show you something kind of in the broader picture just to kind of get you oriented, how it fits into Milburn Avenue and Lackawanna and the rest of Taylor Park. Then we're going to zoom in a little bit. So this is option A, we're going to call it. And then the next slide, go ahead, Jesse, is just kind of zoomed in a little bit more. And this is where we start to show you some of the detail, and we have our legend of what all the different pieces are of this, and and some of the pluses and minuses down on the bottom with the bullet points of it. So let's walk through this first option here, option A. Option A obviously is retaining all 4 quadrants of the rose garden right where they are currently. The one thing that we wanted to try and do that is different here than the existing park design is, I know we talked a lot about creating an entrance that is accessible from what is the left side of the drawing, Milburn Avenue near Lee's Asian restaurant there. So what we've done is we've created on the left side, there is a 3, a little number 3 up top there. So that's kind of a little entry plaza, which is just a half circle sort of a space there where you feel like you're coming off the sidewalk and coming into the space. It has a couple of tables and chairs there that would be anchored and be there permanently. And then coming off of that, where the number 2 is, very good, is a walkway. It wouldn't even be officially considered a ramp because it's such a gentle slope from that corner down to where you would get into closer to the main axis of the rose garden. And that would just kind of slope down. On the Milburn Avenue side of that access way where the number 2 is, there would be a retaining wall in there, not so much as a retaining wall to hold the slope back, but really much more as a seat wall where people can sit and hang out and try to, that would start kind of be a little bit of the front door of the park as well. As you come through where the number 2 is on the left, okay, where the number 2 is on the left, to create that sense of entry and gateway into Taylor Park, we have those 2 gray pieces there on the corners. Those are columns. Those would be kind of vertical elements, columns that you'd kind of walk through, and that would be kind of the welcoming moment. Not actually 2, but there's 3 columns. 1 on each side of the 2 on that walkway, but then there's another way to get into the park where the number 3 is, which would be a series of steps and walkways over on the left side. Down in there, yeah, coming down to where the number 6 is. Very good. So you find your way down into the park there, but in not such a straight way, and there will be some steps involved there. So that's not the accessible route, but it's another option, and it's kind of a neat little wandering kind of route through the landscape as opposed to the direct route through the openness of the new walkway and a lot more lawn that is out there now. The light green or the green colors that you see out there represent a lot more lawn than what is currently there. The darker green circles represent if they're bigger shade trees, if they're smaller kind of evergreens, maybe a holly or a spruce tree or something like that. And then the things that are kind of pink circles, as noted on the right side in the legend, those are ornamental trees. That would be something like a dogwood or a magnolia or a serviceberry, something that's not going to grow 60, 70 feet tall like an oak tree would, or the elm tree. That's where the number 1 is. So we talked about coming into the park from the left side of the drawing. You can also come into the park from the right side of the drawing at the top. What we have going on there is as you come across Milburn Avenue, right at the crosswalk, there's another little entry plaza there. So you can walk through another gateway set of columns, and then down a set of steps that are in a kind of a semicircular sort of fashion. They're designed, and they kind of drop down 2 steps at a time, until you get down that, I think it's about a 9-foot grade change, down to the number 11. Number 11 is another little sitting area, a couple of tables and chairs in there, and a little bit of an open space where people can gather. It kind of ties down the end of that long walkway that number 2 is, that also has the seat wall. So those are our 2 ways into the park from Milburn Avenue. Also out near the number 3 where the crosswalk is near Lackawanna, we've kind of shifted the bus stop. We're thinking about getting a new bus stop type of shelter over a little bit to the left where the number 5 is, just to the right of the elm tree. Correct. Okay, so you come down into the park as we see a lot more lawn in there. We put a couple of benches, or you can go either through the rose garden or around it with a circular path. We have some benches similar to what's out there now, in pairs of 2, so it creates a little bit more of a place where you can be by yourself, or you can sit and talk with someone else. So we have pairs of 2s on the top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right in the rose garden. But also something that we did was we enlarged that center circle in this one, and we took out the gazebo in the center. A lot more sun coming into this space. It kind of opens up the space of the rose garden visually a lot more, and kind of lets you see through even into the rest of Taylor Park. And then we added a couple of benches on the inside too, to invite people into the rose garden and really use the space and see that space in there. We think it might be used a little bit more without the roof overhead in there. We dressed up that center circle with a special paving. Maybe it'll be a brick paver, maybe it'll be a concrete paver, it'll be some sort of special paving in there. And then we copied that not only in the center, but we put something on the right side of the rose garden and on the left side of the rose garden, right along that left-right axis there. So that would be places where there are a few more benches where people could also sit and gather. We really kind of decorated, highlighted those areas with some ornamental trees around the edges of those on the right side of the drawing as well. So you really feel like you're coming into the space and you're sitting in a special space there. As you go through the rose garden, you can pass through, and then there's some lawn spaces. The yews that Al had mentioned on the sides that kind of separate the rose garden from the ball field now. We've kind of cleaned out a lot of that. And we're just retaining a straight walk going through down to the flagpole, which is down where number 9 is. But we did create one extra space off to the side of that walkway, which would be a paved space, another gathering space where people could get ready for maybe the game on the baseball field, or if it's in the morning, there might be an exercise class or a yoga class or a stretching class or something, a space in there that's just a place for people to get together and do whatever they might want to do as a community in there. But it's about a 45-foot diameter space, 45-foot diameter space in there. So it can hold a good group of people in there. You can put a little tent in there or multiple tents in there if you wanted to have a little event that required a little bit of covering if people are going to be there for more than a couple of hours. So that kind of sets up that area as not just a lawn area. There is lots of lawn where people could use in whatever fashion they think would be happy to do. We have a little You could put a blanket out on the lawn, just the space could be used in many different ways. What am I missing here?
That dotted line. Is that dotted line?
Okay, two things that I'm missing. The dotted line, what is it? The dotted line is the flood hazard. It represents the flood hazard area. We looked into this plan and some of the flooding. To the bottom side of that area is what New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection considers the flood hazard area. We all know that other areas, the street and everything else can get flooded, but in DEP's mind, that is a special line where typically the flooding should only go to. So it restricts us in terms of where the grade change can go, where we can fill. So we really can't change the grade lower than that line. We can't make mounds and hills and things like that there. We can do it on the high side of that line, and that's why we did some of our stairs and some of our ramping on the high side of that line to limit the potential objections from NJDEP in that area. The other thing that I forgot to mention is we talked about artwork in this as a possibility. Number 12 on the bottom left of the rose garden is artwork. We thought it'd be nice not to interrupt all that's going on along Milburn Avenue with the columns as the gateway there. And then we thought, well, let's not interrupt what's going on in the rose garden itself. So let's kind of bring it outside and just kind of set it back into the landscape. So in this option, the artwork is pulled away from the rose garden, away from Milburn Avenue, and it's just kind of set off into the landscape. It's a nice piece still. I know some people talked about coming here for photos, wedding photos. You need kind of that Instagram moment kind of a thing. And with the gazebo gone in this one, we thought maybe the artwork would be the thing to have your picture taken in front of in there. You need a little something special in addition there. There would be great opportunities for photos I could see over on this side with the trees backing you there, with some of the steps up in top too. There's going to be plenty of other great opportunities in here, but that is kind of what we're thinking of as the Instagram moment in there. Before we go on to the second option, this is option A. So we talked about social areas. Those circles represent places where tables and chairs and people can get together. Number 4 on the bottom circle also has a seat wall where people can get together. Natural lawn for flexible uses. I'm kind of reading the bullets here as a reminder to myself. There is planting along the edges, but a lot more lawn in the middle. We increased the rose garden visibility by getting rid of a lot of the vegetation out near Milburn Avenue. And there's different pedestrian experiences, from the straight walks, very gently sloped walkways going in, to the more stepped areas through the landscape. Before we move on to the next option, it's a whole design and it works together. But when we go and show you the next option, we're going to talk about it as another whole option. But we want to be able at the end of the day for you to say, I like option A, but you can pick and choose maybe and say, I like that circle down at the bottom right here, and I'd like to insert that into another option. So as much as we think these are full designs and they're complete and they were done that way, we will have some ability to kind of hybridize them. So don't think it has to be this one, just because I like the center and the circle in the center of the rose garden, that has to be the option that I'm going to pick. You can say, I like the circle in the center of the rose garden, but I like what I saw in option C later too. So just keep your mind open on all that. Okay. Ryan's going to hang up this option now on the wall. Okay, we'll talk about the rest of the process. Good question, even though we're not answering questions. We're going to hang up, as we go through each option, we're going to hang it up there. When we're done going through all the options, we're going to hand out voting slips for you guys to say, I like option, I like option A, B, C, or C1. Okay, you'll be able to go up and look at the drawings more closely. You'll be able to ask us questions about them. And then you'll be able to say, which one you like, and also offer one comment in addition to your vote. So that's the process that we're envisioning for the rest of this evening. Online, you will also be able to do a vote and offer a comment as well. Okay, so with that, Ryan's hanging up option A. Let's move on to option B. Option B, once again, kind of fits into the overall, how it fits into the overall townscape there with Milburn Avenue and Lackawanna. In this one, it's a little bit more important to stop on this slide and see that we're reusing some of the graphics that we did in the last option, and that piece of artwork in the last option that was down here has now been pulled up into that corner of the site. Why? Because now it's a highlight as you look down Lackawanna, you come out of the train station or you're just driving down Lackawanna. Now you have something to focus on that draws your eye into the park and makes it an attractive connection. Either that from the reservation or the train station, and it'll start to draw people down into there and say, what is that? Why am I, I want to go there and see what that is. So that's why this is a really important broader view for this one. But let's move on to the zoomed in version. So we kind of worked that same concept of two entries near along Milburn Avenue, but in this case, instead of that straight line and the little curved areas, the hard circle areas, we kind of waved it a little bit more, just to kind of make it a little bit more of a gentle walking area that you can kind of meander as opposed to get to the point and really rely on the axes of the rose garden. Where number 2 is on the left side of the top left of the drawing, the walkway wanders through, but we did have a little peel off just at the bottom left of that. There's 3 benches in that area. Go ahead, up a little higher, left a little. There you go. 3 benches in that area. And then the path kind of wanders through. Because we're wandering and things are meandering a little bit here, we don't have that as much length. So we have to have what is actually an accessible ramp. So there's a ramp with handrails on that side there, just to the right of the number 2. On the right side, the entrance is much broader. There's a little bench area as well on that, where I think that's a 6. No, that's an 8. My eyes are failing me. But then below that, number 3, instead of the last option, we had broad steps with 2 steps and 2 steps and 2 steps. Where number 3 is now, it's just one big set of steps. You're going to go up and down that full grade change right then and there. It'll bring you down, and you'll be down at grade by the time you get into that center axis of the rose garden. Very good. Okay, let's see what else. Out at Milburn Avenue, we shifted the bus stop from the Lackawanna Avenue intersection to the left of the Elm Tree, right there. And then there's a couple benches to the left of that right on Milburn Avenue. So that'll all kind of play together very nicely, because I think more of the bus stop is in there. So now the bus stop is kind of in the center of that whole area where the buses can stop. I think that works out a little bit better. The rose garden, in this case, once again, we have the circular path on the outside and the walkways up and down and left and right through the rose garden. But the left and right one, we widened significantly so that we can put benches right in the middle of that pathway. They're benches without backs, so you can look to the north and look to the south and look at all the different pieces of the rose garden while you're in there. We did also highlight the ends of the left and right path, once again with ornamental trees. In this one, you notice there's a lot less lawn in there. We have some lawn up near Milburn Avenue, up top there. Yep, we have some lawn up there. Those trees that are there, the green circles, are shade trees, so they're going to be branched higher, so you're going to see under them into the park. And we're really just thinking that it's going to be kind of you're looking across the lawn or into the park area there. The next layer down is the ramp, and then the next layer is going to be another shade tree, but maybe with some ground cover or low plantings in that area. So you'll still be able to see over it, but nothing that's going to get more than 2 or 3 feet high in there. We want to maintain that visibility into the rose garden and into the rest of Taylor Park. In this one, we took the gazebo out of the center of the rose garden, but we kind of extended the feel of the rose garden by pulling the gazebo to the south on that axis. And it kind of acts as almost like a backdrop now for the rose garden. And then around that whole gazebo area is more some paths and lawn in that space there. And then we kind of shaped that space as well with the lawn and then shade trees that kind of wrap around it. Go ahead, show the shade trees that wrap around. Very good, Jesse. We're working it now. And then underneath those shade trees, we have a couple of benches because it's going to be shady and people are going to enjoy. Some are going to enjoy the sun. Some are going to enjoy sitting on the benches in those areas. Okay. The north-south axis maintains its pretty much same alignment so that it finishes on the flagpole down at number 9. And then it just kind of ties into that path that comes around the baseball field there. So this is a very nice option that kind of ties in and uses a lot of the existing elements in there. Dense planting along the sides to kind of screen the buildings that are near each other. Curved linear walks that allow for more of a meander feel. Central axis is maintained and reinforced with the new gazebo location. We like the seating clusters that are in there and the wider paths that allow for the seating in the rose garden, we think are a nice feature. And then that artwork right at the end of Lackawanna, we think this is a thumbs up one as well.
Just a couple comments I want to make also, and this is true in all of the schemes, is the existing elm tree, which is out there as well. And you can see that it's been liberated from its choker of asphalt that is out there right now. And like I said, that happens in all the schemes that we're presenting this evening in different ways, in different geometries, let's put it that way. But we always do kind of a softer sort of lawn or planting around it so that the tree will continue to thrive in that space. And I think what I like about this scheme itself, not that I'm trying to get any votes for it or anything like that, but I'm just describing one of my thoughts, is that to me, the elm tree to the north of that central path and the gazebo, which is now located at the south of that central path, are kind of like endpoints for the rose garden. So you've got a very natural focus on the north end being the tree itself. And then this more man-made architectural feature, the gazebo, on the south end of that space. So they very nicely, I think, define the rose garden in this scheme. So that, I think, is what is brought to the fore on this particular idea.
Okay, so Ryan's placing the next option up on the wall. So with that, we'll go to option C. Option C really has 2 parts to it. There's a C and a C1. Once again, this is how it kind of fits into the overall, and I think it's kind of important to pause here and see that at the end of Lackawanna, we see the artwork, something as artwork there, and we're kind of combining it. We're hoping we can work with somebody to create artwork that is also doubling as a bus stop in there, so that it kind of serves dual purposes. And then there's one less element that's out there along the Milburn Avenue streetscape as well. But with that, let's zoom into C1 here. Okay. The most obvious part of this one is this one shows with one of the quadrants of the rose garden being changed out into more of a people plaza. So really bringing people down into the rose garden and letting them, bringing a larger group of people down in there and more tables and chairs and really giving that as a more community gathering kind of a space right within the rose garden. So people can really enjoy that space and the roses that are around them. Okay, another difference in this one, the axis that everyone sees of the rose garden is traditionally north, south, and east, west, but we're kind of turning it a little bit in this case so that you're coming in more from the left side of the drawing and you're looking kind of across. There's a plaza up at number 7, and then you look straight out of that plaza down across the lawn and across the leaf-shaped gazebo in the center of the rose garden. And then you're looking across the rose garden to a backdrop of some ornamental trees there. So we've kind of shifted from a viewpoint, the visual axis of the rose garden in there. The access into the overall Taylor Park is also on the left side. You get both a set of steps to the right of number 7, to the right of number 7 there, a set of steps that kind of meander down to the central axis of the rose garden. And coming from the corner of Lee's, we have a ramp that slopes down in to the rose garden and gets to the east-west axis of the rose garden. In between those two access points is a lawn, and that's going to be a sloped lawn. So we put some boulders in there that people can hang out on the sloped lawn or hang out on a boulder and kind of, once again, look down towards the rose garden. And this is a big kind of people watching kind of a place in there. The steps, which are number 3, and the ramp area, number 2, will both have those columns that we talked about as the gateway into the park. So those would be the gateway elements there. Number 7 is a sitting area, a little plaza, kind of a table and chair place that people who are getting food to go from the local restaurants can sit at and look at that. Because we did take some of the roses out of the rose garden, we decided to put some roses around that number 7 area, the plaza area, so that kind of gives an overture of the roses and what's to come when you go deeper into the garden. So we think that's a nice little touch there as well. Obviously, the paths are much different in this one. It's more curvy, curves all over, so it's much more of a meandering feel, but you cannot make that meander from Lee's over to the sneaker place on the right side. It's once you come down, you're going to meander through and go down into Taylor Park a little bit more. Up at number 5 is, we said, bus stop / artwork, and that's just an overlook. There is no access really down into the garden. There's no paved walkway, no steps, nothing in there. We'll probably save some money by doing that because we don't have to pick up that whole grade change there. In the rose garden itself, we went with a different kind of non-traditional gazebo in the center on this one. It doesn't have to be leaf shaped, but we've done something similar before and it worked out very well. So we just want to show you a different shape that says it doesn't have to be the hexagon or the octagon that you see in parks so often. We can come up with something a little bit more different and something that you don't see everywhere else. When you come through the garden, once again, you have the circle around the outside and the north, south, east, west axis. But if you wander around the edges, as you get closer to Taylor Park, we have 2 number 12s. One is centered on the north-south axis, down right there. That one, and then over to the bottom right. 2 number 12s we're thinking of them as rain gardens, places to create actually a place to store some water after the rains, but also to visually encourage the community to learn a little bit about stormwater management and how important it is to our community, and use it as a little bit of an education opportunity as well. In the area of number 15, we have a little bit of a lawn piece there in the sidewalk with some benches around that. Those are closer to the ball field, so it just kind of creates this almost backdoor entry into the rest of the space here. But it's a nice look to that area. It's kind of wide open and very welcoming into this area. So we have a lot of planting.
Can you go back one? You went to C1. There you go.
Okay, so we have a lot of planting along the edges. We still have a lot of lawn where you're walking through, so it feels open and there's lots of views into the garden. The rain gardens are definitely something different about this one. And then we think that there's kind of a nice complement to the rose garden that the rain gardens are. There's definitely opportunities for flexibly programmed spaces as the lawn is there. If someone, if there happened to be a pop-up performance, I could see 14 area as a great place for that. And people can sit on the lawn, or they can actually all fit within that area as well. The curved walkways are definitely a new feel to this area as well. And the broad entry spaces at the street and the park, we think are very open arms. Come enjoy the space here. We know this option might tweak some people because it's taking one piece of the rose garden out, but we wanted to try it and just to see what's going on there and see how it would play out. But to go along with that, we said, let's create an option C1 and see what happens if we take that same basic layout, keep all 4 quadrants of the rose garden, and then shift that seating area that was in the northwest quadrant, shift it off to the edge and let it kind of sit into that landscape edge that's around the side of that sloped lawn. And I think that this is that option. We like the fact that 15 has room for additional tables and chairs. We like the fact that it ties in nicely to that curve coming down that sloped walkway. It looks kind of paved in there, but we did put a tree kind of right in the middle of it. But we kind of faded the tree out a little bit just so you could see all the tables and chairs underneath there. But we think that would provide nice shade for that space as well. So, C1 and C and C1 are very similar. So I'm not going to dwell on it all too much. But it's a nice look to it, but it's definitely a different feel to it because we went back to the full rose garden as is in this one. Anything you want to add to this?
No, I think you pretty much covered it.
So you would walk through these.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jim. That was great. And I think I hope everyone has a sort of a good understanding of the process we've gone through in developing these. And as we said, you'll have a chance to look at these more closely with the plans that are up on the wall. But we just wanted to finish up with a couple more slides of some of the primary elements and what those might look like that we just talked about in a number of these schemes. And this first slide that we're looking at are options for the pergola or the shade structure, the gazebo, in other words. And on the lower right, we can see an open air gazebo that's fairly similar to what you have out there right now. Disregard the yellow color. We're not suggesting any particular paint colors at this point in time, but rather we're just putting images out there to give you an idea of what the size might be, what the shape might be, what the configuration might be. It might be nice to do sort of a cupola on top of it, so it has a little more detail to it, and some air circulation as well. So that's the more traditional style of a shade structure, as we like to call them as landscape architects. But just above that is an image of what we're calling a permeable shade structure. So if it's raining, you're not going to stay dry, but if it's a nice sunny day, you will get this really dappled sunlight coming through it. And those are the leaf shade structures that Jim was referring to a couple of minutes ago. You can see that they are sort of these lozenge shaped, leaf shaped, if you will, elements above it, above your head. And they even have the little petioles, the stems on the leaves themselves, as you can see, sticking out there. And then they've got this infill of a material that's metal. So it's very low maintenance, but it allows light to come through. And it's just a little more non-traditional, a little more cutting edge. And I think something that is organic in its shape, that people would say, wow, that's really kind of a sculptural sort of a thing that's happening there. Similar to the upper left-hand corner, a shade structure, a little bit smaller scale than the ones we're looking at on the upper right-hand side. But again, leaves actually forming a shade on the ground, for example. So smaller scale, but still kind of a nice idea, kind of fits into the idea of park. Rose garden could be quite nice also. And then on the lower left of this image are just a very quick idea of entry columns. We were talking about in our schemes A and B, for example, as you come in off of the sidewalk from Milburn Avenue, the idea of columns, entry columns happening there. These are really traditional. These are probably a little bit taller than we would like to see out there. I don't think we're looking for anything to be imposing, but we really want them to be welcoming, gateway kind of an idea that guide you into this portion of Taylor Park. So just some quick ideas as to what these elements might look like. And we will finish up with one more slide. Next one, to give you some ideas of the thoughts that we have had as far as pavements are concerned. And in certain areas where we are less concerned, for example, with snow removal, or that may be getting less foot traffic on it, in the upper left of this image is stone dust material. So a very finely graded type of a stone, which packs very, very densely. You see them in many, many European parks, is one type of material that we're considering. Permeable pavers are indicated on the upper right of this image. They come in numerous shapes. These are very rectangular in their shape, very elongated rectangles. You can see there's a wide range of colors just in this one area. It does not need to be that elaborate or with that large of a range of colors. It could be a much tighter range of color, and it could be more traditional shapes as well. But the idea of them being permeable, I think, is something that we would like to use here, so that any excess water that you get in storm events is not only being absorbed by planting beds, but also by the pavements as well. And then other areas with more traditional pavements, such as concrete, as shown in the lower left, as you can see along in there, perhaps scored in a diagonal pattern, a bit more traditional in its look. The possibility of also using asphalt, a lower budget type of a thing, but still a very serviceable, nice material to use to define pathways. And there's even the possibility of using colored asphalt. We're describing it here as red, and it's probably showing more red on the screen than we would actually like to see. But if you often go into Pennsylvania, you very often see, even on the roadways, they tend to be more of a reddish brown color as far as the asphalt is concerned, rather than a really blackish kind of a gray. So just to indicate that we're starting to look at materials to sort of bolster our design ideas here and really make it as strong of a design as we possibly can. So that is our presentation for this evening. As I said, we only had about a dozen images to go through. And like magic, Ryan has put all of these drawings up on the wall. I really wish I had the ability to put up a pot of coffee right now to share with all of you, but lacking that, what we are going to share with you are the voting slips that Jim mentioned earlier in the evening. And Jesse will be opening up the poll online for the people who are joining us online. You are getting the exact same voting slip online that people here in person have. And just to recap what Jim said earlier, we are asking people to vote for what park design they like the best. Is it A, B, C, or C1? And then we're asking you to add on to that, if you like, one additional comment. And those comments can be, as Jim had mentioned earlier, I really like option A, but could you maybe do the gazebo in the center on that one, and that type of thing. So that's just one example of what you can put on as a comment. As you are thinking about what you would like to vote for or looking at drawings, we will open the floor to questions or comments that you have. Now's the time. Yes, in the back.
So let's talk about those columns a little. I'm worried that they might be a little, lack of a better word, loopy for our nice natural park.
Okay.
There being a way to do an arch that says welcome to Taylor Park. There's a similar arch down by where the old Charlie Brown used to be, that little park there. Nice wrought iron arch. Something to think about that isn't quite so.
Absolutely. I think we can do something much more transparent than columns, as you mentioned, an archway. But you know, the columns could even be defined by sort of an open framework of like fencing, steel fencing or something like that. So there's a traditional component to it, but it's much more transparent.
Is there any place in it that says welcome to Taylor Park? That's sort of like gateway.
We weren't indicating that, but that's a comment that is great to hear. If people are in favor of that, that would definitely be the place to locate it, I think. Okay. Any other questions?
Before you vote, get up and look at the
Well, voting
The drawing's more
kept
clear.
open for people who are not participating today for a day. They should participate by watching the video.
That was not the plan.
We're away on vacation. this week.
I say.
No, I'm just saying, get a quarter sample, they would open for a couple of days rather than tonight.
I think we would need to take that under further consideration, but the original intent was just to engage people who showed up here tonight and who are online as well. But I understand what you're saying about sample size as well.
Give an idea of what any of these plans cost.
Not at this point. Not at this point. Yes.
Again, recognizing that this is such a small forum, both presently and on the Zoom, I think I have two questions. One, did you bring the breakout sheets, the outcome boards from the breakout groups?
Mhm.
Because those, do you have them tonight?
No, we do not have those with us.
Okay, because those were the suggestions that came from the largest number of people.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think there was some presentation here that was not reflected in those breakout boards.
I think we took into account a lot of the comments
Right.
that were made there.
Mhm. But I think there were some suggestions that you're making tonight that was not reflected in the breakout boards. And I would also just like to make the suggestion that we remove option C, because it was very, very clear at the last presentation that you made that the greatest number of people were for the preservation of the rose garden and more of the status quo. So I think to remove 25% of that quad goes against what the vast majority of people were saying.
Okay.
So I think it should
As
be-
I mentioned last time around, we as designers like to look at whatever options are available to us. And we know what you said, but as you can see, there are 3 options up there, 75%, that keep the rose garden, all 4 quadrants in place. So we just veered off course a little bit. We were bad, I know, but we can't help ourselves because that's the way we're trained to look at a design solution that may require a little bit of tweaking and that sort of a thing. So that's why we looked at that. By all means, if you don't like that one, I'm expecting that comment on your ballot sheet back to us.
So
Yes.
a big part of this exercise through the vision plan was to provide space for the SID and for the paper mill, to be able to do some kind of entertainment, because eventually Main Street might not be open. No one knows what that's gonna be. So I'm just thinking that number A with number 4 and number 7 really provided
Mhm.
what the SID and the paper mill were looking to achieve, and what
Right.
we were hoping part of this exercise was opening it up more to Milburn Avenue, coming down, like having people really walk in, and that seemed to have a lot of community seating and give those 2 big elements. So I think that's really important.
Very good.
Just to respond to that, one of the reasons we did the C option was because it responded to that desire from a certain group. I know the people, a lot of the community wanted to keep the element of the rose garden because it's the rose garden and because you do that. It wasn't just that we wanted to design something different. We heard from another representation that there was something else, another desire for this project. And this is a fulfillment of that. So it wasn't just that we were designing for the heck of it. It has a reason, and you can see that one quadrant becomes a very strong community gathering spot that's much closer to Milburn Avenue than in A, it's pulled much deeper into the park, so it functions a little bit differently. So it doesn't have quite the attachment that it does in the A option.
But in A, you have the seating along the top
We do have some
Yeah,
seating
yeah,
up there.
so-
We do have a couple of small pods in there.
Right.
And then in the C1 option, we created a small seating, this area, we basically pulled it out of this area and we pulled it into that lawn area as well. So that became, this is the sloped area. So this is flat lawn next to a paved area that is also flat. So that can both play as a community space. And by putting flat lawn next to a paved area, it responds nicely because you can use the paved area, and if something gets bigger, just move out onto the lawn, you got more space. So that plays nicely too. So there's a couple of different thoughts that were going on.
Thanks, Jeff. Yes,
What has your experience been when you design things like this, and there is a lot of lawn, and there are a lot of shade trees? Because I know in my yard, I can't get that grass to grow and be vibrant and robust looking. And there is the other aspect of people moving away from heavily watered grass,
Indeed.
monoculture.
Indeed.
Just wonder what your perspectives are.
well,
Especially lawns.
well, part of the reason we put lawn forward as much as we did in certain schemes that you're looking at tonight is it will allow us to achieve a lower budget, because to install lawn is definitely less expensive than doing, a ground cover planting bed or a shrub planting bed, which are going to be just more expensive to do. But the other reason why we were looking for lawn as sort of a design element, as Jim was just explaining, is that it can become a place for overflow or for people to congregate, things of that nature. As far as the shade is concerned, I think what needs to be done is we need to make sure that we specify the correct seed mix, which would include things like chewings fescues or fine fescues, which are more shade tolerant, as opposed to Kentucky bluegrass, which wants sun, sun, sun. So I think part of the problem could be alleviated by specifying the correct type of lawn seed that's going to happen in those areas.
So have you had success?
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of work we do is with the New York City Parks Department. They have many, many existing trees on their park properties, which obviously cast a lot of shade, but lawn is an important element to those designs as well. And that tends to work pretty well, yes.
Just as a follow-up, feel free to say, I like option B, but there's a lot of lawn in there, maybe we can do a little bit less. That would be a wonderful comment.
Yes,
Yes, I remember from the last session also comments that came on a petition that was circulated, social media and everywhere, that people who, I guess it's all areas around the park, people who live there were very concerned about the noise level. So I think to sort of touch on a little bit more what Diane said, the businesses have a need, but also the residents have a need. And so I just wondered how would you balance that with each of these designs? The residents needs, the businesses needs, how do you these designs?
well, I
balance that out?
that really falls to the programming of the site. And by that, I mean, how often will there be a performance happening there and that sort of thing, So if those are minimized, then obviously I think it's less of a concern for the surrounding residents. Right now, the way in which all of these designs have expressed themselves, I see it being a fairly quiet space. There aren't large, incredibly large areas where boisterous groups can gather, I don't think. There are smaller seating areas, benches, seat walls. Benches have been placed so that you're not able to get a huge gathering of people. And really, I think the only noisy component that might happen are these programmed activities, if it is some sort of a performance happening or something like that.
And I'm not talking about
No, I think they're smaller scale. I think they're smaller scale performances. You were starting to say something about C1?
The C1 design has that quadrant.
Right.
To allow for more space for that type of activity. Is that how I understood it?
That's happening in option C, yes,
Yeah.
where the one quadrant has been removed, exactly.
But in C1, we shifted that similar space.
To the side,
Yeah, that space that was in here has been shifted out to here. And in A, we have this space down in the bottom right of the design. So they all have some space in there. Not they all. This one really doesn't.
I do think there was quite a big group that's concerned about that issue. in this level. So that mitigated some way. It's that number of things that are done there.
Yes.
With any of these, have you guys been thinking about flooding and flood water mitigation? Is there any design better for that?
Well, we indicated where that floodway line is on our drawings. It's shown as a dashed line, which is what New Jersey DEP recognizes as, an area for potential flooding. But some of the materials that we're looking to mitigate, look, if we get something like Ida again, no matter what we do, that's not going to be accommodated here. But on a smaller scale, the type of pavements that we use, the permeable pavements that I was talking about, will allow water to discharge into the groundwater more readily. In one of the options, two actually, C and C1 is where we have the rain gardens located. And those will be slightly depressed areas that will be graded in such a way that, a stormwater event will be, those areas will be taking water from that space as well. So there are some mechanisms we've built into the design to accommodate that.
If people on Zoom want to talk before everyone starts getting up. remember-
I was going to ask, are there any questions from
Yeah,
Zoom?
we're gonna take some comments online. Anyone who's online and would like to make a comment, just raise your hands. Hello?
Hi, are you calling on me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to know a couple of things. What, if you remove the buffer along Milburn Avenue, you open it up to the bus stop noise and the pollution from traffic. And two, if you're looking toward Taylor Park through, what are you doing so that you're not staring at the back of the backstop?
Well, to answer your first question about the buffer along Milburn Avenue, we're not looking to take it out in its entirety. Obviously, the Elm Tree will still be there, and there may be some select pieces of vegetation, shrubs and such, that we might want to keep if grading allows us to do so. But if we also hear the comment that it's important to have a buffer along the sidewalk and buffering the park itself, that is a level of planting that can be added to any of these design schemes as well.
Okay, so that's open-ended is what you're saying.
Well, I think what I'm saying is if that's a desire, that if we hear that it's important to do a buffer along this edge, then we can do so, but we have to temper that with visibility into this area as well.
We did hear earlier on that visibility and into this space and opening it up more to the street was a desire. So we'll have to balance that a little bit if that becomes a comment that is repeated. But yes, you are correct. What we've shown you perceive properly. We opened up a lot more of the park to the street visually by having less planting along that edge than what's currently there now.
Okay, and at the last session, I heard everybody say they wanted small, subtle artwork and that the roses themselves are Instagram worthy. People don't want more landscaping, not landscaping, hardscaping. There's less pavement is desirable. And a lot of these designs show more pavement. So just a comment.
Well, part of the reason why pavement was indicated to the extent that it was is to allow an accessible route from the sidewalk into the rose garden itself. If you're familiar with the asphalt choker, as I described it, around the existing elm tree, there's very little pavement there, but it's incredibly steep pavement as well. So in order for us to provide an accessible route, that is someone in a wheelchair, someone who is mobility challenged in other ways, who may be using a rollator or a walker, for example, in order to allow a more gentle slope to occur, you just need pavement in order to do so.
Oh, then let me clarify, because I think actually A and B shows a nice entry options. It's between the rose garden quadrants. You're taking away grass there. And that's an area right now that absorbs floodwater, and you're putting more pavement there. And it's been my experience that permeable pavers aren't really as permeable as ground and garden beds and things with roots.
That's true.
I wasn't talking about the entrance pavement. I was talking within the rose garden area.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Anyone else online?
Yes. Hi.
Hello?
I have a question. What are the columns that you discussed? What will they be made from?
We are still thinking about what those can be made of. I mean, the image that we showed indicated a more like a masonry type of a column. So it might be brick, it might be stone, it might be concrete. But we've also heard a comment this evening that perhaps they become a little more open. Perhaps they're an archway overhead that says, "Welcome to Taylor Park." And as I was previously describing, those columns could still be identified as columns, but become more transparent, just as sort of using ironwork or something like that, you know? So we're still thinking of that. Rather, we put them on the table just to see how people would react to the idea of identifying the entry to this particular space of Taylor Park in this semi-formal sort of way.
So those are the columns are on A and B and not on C, or are they on every
I
proposal?
think it's A and B.
No,
A and B.
they're here on C.
No, they're on C also.
C. This one, they're not really on B.
They are on A, C, and C1.
Are they going to be that high as being shown there? Because it didn't,
No.
you can't tell from the drawing.
No, I don't think we're looking for them to be that tall at all, nor would they have the adjacent walls next to them either.
Right.
Just
Right.
putting it out there as an idea.
So we don't really know that. We shouldn't vote based on the columns one way or the other.
Well, you could make a comment that says you don't like the columns, or you do like the columns, or maybe the columns are too big, or whatever, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I want to vote on something, but it's not just one comment. There's a lot going on. The other issue is the gazebo in the shade, because I'm a little confused. Has the issue with the gazebo been addressed tonight?
No, that has not been brought up as a comment.
So, but is it in any of the drawings or just it's a vague, whatever number, 14 or?
We are including the gazebo on option B. It's not centrally located in that option, but rather to the south of the rose garden. We are also showing a shade structure in options C and C1 in the center where the gazebo is right now. On our plans, we're showing it as a leaf shade structure, but a comment that someone might make is, I don't like the leaf shade structure, put the gazebo back in the center. So it's only on one of the 4 options that we're showing tonight, option A, where the gazebo is not included whatsoever.
Also, if I recommend, I don't know if I recollect correctly, I'd like to talk about what the differences are with what's being done with the wall where Miss Lee's is. Because one of them has grass there, but another one has, I think, a pathway.
We're trying to understand.
Yeah, it's hard for me to, I'm trying to verbalize it.
Yeah,
Because there's a wall there that had been discussed in other meetings where the discussion was maybe putting,
Okay,
like taller hedges or hiding it a little bit. And tonight it looks like everything's flat against it. Against,
thank you. What we're doing is in all the options against Lee's wall, there's always planting there.
okay,
In option A, it's very heavily planted along there with a combination of trees and shrubs and trees and shrubs and ornamental trees. Similarly to that in B, in C, it becomes a lighter planting, much more shrub and less tree based. I think the difference that we did neglect to mention during the presentation was the wall along the sneaker place on the right side of the drawing. In the C option, we're planning on doing low planting along that wall specifically for the purpose of putting artwork on that wall to kind of be a backdrop for the overlook seating area here on 13. So this is more of an artwork. So we purposely left that wall a little bit cleaner so that we can do something on that wall if we negotiate with the owner to do something on that wall.
thank you very much. You know, I'm sorry if I sound mixed up, but I am a little mixed up. So I want to be able to vote, you know, the way, you know, I want. They all seem pretty, you know, they all have the pros and cons, I guess. But I really appreciate it. Thank you.
thank you, Susan.
Okay, we'll go to a comment here in the room. Question.
Yeah, hi, good evening. I think it would be prudent if we did try and do an online survey for at least a week, like we've done with other things. Just because there's only about 15 people online and about 10 and 15 in the room. And I think it's important that it's almost like a menu. I want to take one piece off of one thing and one piece off of another thing and add this element and that element. And I think we're kind of locked in and limited to if we pick this, let's just say B, we pick B, but we like something else that's in C1 that we want to incorporate. I think that it's important that we get to almost, you know, say the things that we do like. I don't know. And there's not enough of us here. I think we did have over 1,000 people sign up on that Save the Walbridge Gardens. And so I think that to have 1,000 people sign up for it and it's June and people are busy with different events that are going on, it's been my experience. Always the second time someone comes back, they have, you know, they don't show up. So, and it continues that way. So I believe that we should try and have maybe some type of a survey or something, some type of an open survey where people can get on and give their opinions. I just don't think there's enough data points here. It's just not.
Understood. Yes.
I think I might have a very unpopular suggestion. Taylor Park is really a block. I think it's 13 acres, 15 acres, but the perimeter of the park is on Milburn Avenue, Whittingham, Ridgewood Road, and Main Street. And I feel that it is almost unfortunate that so much is proposed to it be enhanced on the Milburn Avenue side when people are coming in from all directions. Whittingham is residential, Ridgewood is residential, but the main street, so many people enter the park through the main street. I'd almost like to see a division of resources whereby there's something not as comprehensive as this, but another entranceway into Taylor Park from the Main Street side. And it seems the most logical place for that is the walkway that leads straight to the bridge into the park area. And it would be so easy to do duplicate pillars or wrought iron, welcome to Taylor Park, just because, again, you're talking about 25% of the entrance coming in from Milburn Avenue and people coming in from 3 out of the other 4 entranceways.
Understood. I would love that to be a second phase of this project. But this is the area that's been identified from previous planning studies done by Perkins Eastman, for example. And that is the direction of that was given to us when this RFP was let out back in the fall of last year.
One more person.
Okay. Hello, friend.
Okay, can you hear me?
Now we can, yes.
Right, well, it's very, very hard on Zoom to hear the questions being asked by the people in the room because they're not mic'd. So I have to really strain to hear and have my sound on very loud. But I did hear 2 people ago, someone said exactly what I was raising my hand to say, which is, I don't think that I can give my best response to the work that you've done by just making one comment to one pre-selected scheme. You know, it's too complicated. And there are some elements that are very important. And I obviously don't want to just pick, let's say, the gazebo situation. I'd like to talk about some of the other elements. And I'm not sure why, as a resident of this town for many years, I can't, and a very big user of the so-called gateway, why we can't write in, you know, more comments. I mean, is that like too much to do? I mean, can we do that? Can you change your mind and let us write more?
How many more comments are you looking to do? Is it like? 10,
Well,
15?
this is how I start. I would start from the most important thing, which is the gazebo, of course.
And that's what was guiding our direction. You know, indicate what is the most important thing to you. And I think the part of the reason why we try to limit it to comments is that you can understand if we get back 12 or 15 comments from numerous people, how difficult it's going to be to come to some consensus.
No, wait a minute. You know, you seem like, obviously you're, you know, a professional. I worked for many years. You know, we've been given, I don't know about you, but in the jobs I've held, I've had many more complex tasks given me to do as part of my mandate than to sort through.
You misunderstand me. I didn't say it would be more complex or difficult for us to do. It would be more complex or difficult to come to some consensus about what direction we should go in here.
Yeah, but I don't like being forced to give an answer or to have my answers go into some slot that you fellows and gals in your firm have predetermined. That just doesn't feel right. But let me ask you another question before I get cut off. So in my mind, and I am a traditional old-fashioned person in some ways, living in a house here in Milburn that was built in 1930, but I have done the kitchen over. I've ripped out a bathroom when I had to. I mean, I'm not against upgrading. I'm not living in a shack. But when it comes to the small town flavor, of the traditional gazebo, and in some towns, they have a bigger, more like a band shell. That look with the flowers and the gazebo, I mean, it's so classic. It defines some small towns. They use it. We have a paper mill, but some towns don't have a paper mill. So they have the gazebo. You know, has that gone out of style? And instead, what's become popular is like marching, you know, plastic or whatever they are, fiberglass leaves that are hanging over people that don't shelter them from anything and look like you're in Disneyland. I mean, is that where parks are going? Have I missed something?
No, you haven't missed anything. I don't think parks are generally going in that direction. If the intent is to keep this park very traditional in its aesthetic, then that is a comment that we would like to hear.
Right, but if I can only write one comment, I don't know where to begin. I mean, the gazebo is the most important thing to me, but I could add some other things. It doesn't make any sense. I guess because I was a writer and a journalist for 25 years, so I think sharing information defines who I am.
Well, all I can say is we haven't asked people to put down their names on these pieces of paper. And so if they intend or want to write more than one thing, we'll never know who actually did it.
Okay, so I'm not going to get a failing grade if I put in 3 things?
You can interpret that however you like.
So could we maybe, everyone's point, extend, we don't have a deadline that I know of, open this up, like Maggie said, let some more comments come in, because obviously these are just too confined of ideas, and they're beautiful, they hit some points, but maybe we have to keep the drawing board open and going forward and see what the community speaks to you.
Mhm.
And, you know, just keep the timeline open.
Mhm. Understood. We will confer with Jesse and council and such, and the committee, and a decision will be made. Yes.
I came in late, so I missed the intro, but from what I'm looking at and with the conversation about the gazebo for this, there's not an option that you've given right now that has the traditional gazebo in the center where it is right now. Is that correct?
We are not showing that, which does not mean it can't happen. We thought that everyone could visually picture what that's like because you've seen it. So that's why we put forward these options that do not have a traditional gazebo in the center. If that's what you really want, then tell us that.
And so I think the point of the person who was calling in too was, you know, that's probably a popular option that people would like to say.
Okay.
Like to keep the gazebo in the middle. And so there may be an additional comment or two about the 4 options, you know, that we would want to throw in.
Understood.
Do you have any of these slides, any more slides with you? Because when we had our committee meeting, you had a picture of a white gazebo.
Right. We don't have that with us this evening. But if you're saying it's part of our previous presentation, I'll know what it is just by you mentioning it.
Fences on the side.
That's right.
That's why we took it out.
That's right.
It was a little Victorian.
No, Victoria, but it had the fences on the side that we thought was useful.
Yes. It was a little Victorian.
Go right ahead. Any other questions online? Okay.
So what was the time frame we originally set out? Do you know what we were looking to do? Because I think we have to extend it. Obviously, there's too many open-ended things. So Jesse, Maggie, do you remember, Juliet, what we were looking at a time?
I thought we were talking about a year from now.
We have time.
We were looking to put together, I think the schedule that we submitted, we were looking to prepare the bid documents, the construction documents, no later than the end of this year. It was basically a 12-month period.
Building it next spring.
Yes.
May 2024, right, that's brilliant. So yeah, so let's open this up get more people, because I don't think anyone here is ready to zero in on any of those 3 plans. I know I'm not. Doesn't look like anybody else is. So let's just kind of keep the process open, if that's possible. You're not gonna get, consensus tonight.
No, we weren't expecting.
Yeah.
Oh, we were expecting more people.
Doing it this first. So let's,
That's a short news.
well, it's a war, 100 days already, it changed.
Okay,
All right.
if no one has any other questions or comments,
Hold on.
hold on.
So just before we kind of close, allow people in the room to fill out their surveys, launch the Zoom poll online. Alan, correct me if I'm wrong, but after this, there's a period where you're going to synthesize all the feedback we've gathered this evening. If we issue a survey and put it out online, that will be incorporated with it. You'll go back, condense this to one main design to present to
Right.
the subcommittee and then to the governing body.
That's
And that
correct.
would be the one that people would consider as the design, whether to move forward.
That's the process. That's correct.
Okay, great. And for the people online, in a few moments, I'll launch the Zoom poll. We'll mute the room in here, and people in the room can walk over to the walls to Alan's right and fill out their surveys. Thank you very much for participating.
Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see everyone.
One other comment for the people online. Zoom did not allow me to put in the open response option. So when we launch the Google form with the survey, I will make sure it gets sent to everyone on the website and on Swift Reach and our reverse 911 system. And that's where you can put in your open comment as well. That was just a limitation on Zoom that we couldn't include here.